reconvene to the regular council meeting for September 25th, 2023. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that this council meeting is being held on the homeland of the Ktunaxa people. Now, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda of the regular council meeting for Monday, September 25th, 2023? Moved by Councillor Ray and seconded by Councillor Popoff. All in favor? Carried. Now, can I get a motion to adopt the following minutes for the Committee of the Whole meeting for Wednesday, September 6th, 2023, and the regular council meeting for Monday, September 11th, 2023? Moved by Councillor Stetsky, seconded by Councillor Popoff. Those in favor? Carried. We have one delegation this evening. Marcel Germer is the city's social development coordinator, is here with the Constable Felicity Parker. Mental health liaison with the Cranbrook RCMP detachment to present on the community situation table. Welcome Marcel and Constable Parker. The floor is yours. Oh, no Constable Parker tonight. Okay. No worries. Okay, welcome Marcel. Thank you.
So I think tonight we were just providing a brief update on the situation table. We had made application back in July for a $75,000 grant to fund the training and the maintenance of the table. The end of July, we received a letter from them saying that we had been successful, our grant was provided, and so today, just to let you know that we did do our first round of training. It was called the mobilization training. Just went out of my head. And that is just when we invited all community partners or interested people that might have wanted to come to find out a little bit about the situation table. Allowed them to ask questions, to kind of query what the next steps were. We had over 50% participants on that call, which was, I think it was quite shocking to everybody that we had that kind of support. The next step is creating the mentorship team, which will be 4 to 6 mentors in our community that will be in-depth trained to support and continue the training on through the table once the table actually gets started. We have a lot of interest and volunteers to do that part of it also, so that's also great to know. So we'll get started on that right away. And then there will be a final training once that's done that actually brings together all the agencies in town that will participate in the situation table, and they will all be trained on basically the privacy protocols and stuff around it, because we are always talking about sensitive and private information in people's lives, and we want to make sure that we are very much adhering to all the privacy expectations around that. So that'll be the last part of the training. After that, they connect us to their database so that we can access the data and upload all the data that we are bringing in, because that's a big part of the criteria of the situation table, is that we are tracking our data, what kind of situations are coming to the table, how we're responding, and the success of that. We also really want to track we're hoping that although the primary goal is always to help people at risk, we're hoping that the other side of that is that we see decreased need for emergency services to respond repeatedly to some of the people in the community that are experiencing multiple risks at one time. So that is, one of the main things that we're really hoping, and that research shows plays out when you bring a situation table to your community. So they will link us to their database, and then we will start collecting the data. The situation table, we're hoping, will be up and running by the end of October. So we're still on track as far as that goal, as long as our training comes together over the next month. Yeah, I think that's about the update at this moment.
Okay, thank you. I have a question from Councillor Stetsky.
Yeah, thank you, and really important initiative, and thank you for your role in making it happen. Has the table had an opportunity to do issue identification? Like what are the issues that you hope the table will help resolve for Cranbrook?
Well, I think right off the top, obviously, crime is going to be, and theft and stuff is going to be one. The wee big opioid overdoses is going to be another one. Um, I- I'd like to say housing is in there, but I don't know that housing is going to be solved by a situation table. But I don't know if anybody's really familiar with the situation table in that it is a risk-driven model that triages things when an agency has tried everything that they can working with an individual or a family, and they're not finding that they're having success, they will bring that situation to the table. That let's say it's somebody who's experiencing homelessness, food scarcity, and kids aren't going to school. So that situation will come to the table. Anybody who's not involved with anything to do with those sorts of things will fall away. And the people that will remain at the table are anybody that can deal with homelessness, food scarcity, and helping kids attend school. And they will then plan an approach for this family. We'll reach out to the family. We'll provide them with the opportunity to access services and supports in the community. And they will then maintain and sustain that file. So everybody else will fall away. Those teams that are involved in that, they call it an intervention. We just call it an outreach. Those people that would be involved in that outreach will stay involved with that family through into them doing better and needing less. So I am assuming that we could see anything come to the table.
Okay, supplemental.
Is there a commitment to multi-year funding? I'm just thinking that you're going to be doing some important work for, sounds like on potentially an individual basis. And then if that support all of a sudden disappears, that's not good for the individual or the community.
Yeah, well, it is, this is one-time funding that comes for the situation table, but they do train, that is part of the reason they train the mentors. They train the mentors to train other people to join the table. The idea is to keep the table like moving over or successful through the years, but they don't fund it after that. So then we do have to figure out ways to get in-kind funding but the training is the big part, right? That's the part that takes a big chunk of the money. And then everybody else that's involved in the situation table is already agencies or services that we have in our community. So we're not paying them additionally. They are already people who are employed within the community and come to the table under that. But there is no future funding for the table.
Councillor Popoff.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Marcel. So the table, is it exclusively for outreach within the community of Cranbrook, or does it also extend into our East Kootenay region?
Originally, we were thinking within the community of Cranbrook. And then when we realized that not the numbers that maybe other people assume, but we do have a lot of people coming to Cranbrook who are maybe not even unhoused, who are reaching out for services support in this area. So we did increase our first idea of an ask by $30,000 to help us have a more regional approach. So that we can, if people come to the community to access services, that we can then connect back to their home community from where they came and try to get them back to their natural supports in their own community. So, and that, takes collaboration dollars and whatnot. So.
Excellent, thank you. And if I may, so as the table is established and hopefully moves forward, as Councillor Stetsky is suggesting, your role and the role of the city, would that still to be at that strategic leadership as opposed to on the ground solving the problems?
Yes, it would be. Right now, I played a fundamental role because it was something that kind of came to me at the beginning. I connected with Felicia, but we instantly made her chair and not me chair, so that she is the one, because it is a frontline role. It is a frontline table. So my role right now is simply to be the co-chair while they're doing it, just to make sure that we can get the table on the ground, have it going well. And then by that time, we'll have another co-chair that steps in. Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, anything further from council? Okay, Marcel, thank you for your presentation tonight.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, we're going to move on to bylaws. First bylaw is item 6.1. The first bylaws for consideration tonight are the official community plan amendment bylaw number 4124 2023, and zoning amendment bylaw number 4125, 2023, regarding Oasis at the Dunes. The OCAP amendment bylaw is back for second reading tonight, while the zoning amendment bylaw is before council for first and second reading. Can I please have Engineering and Development Services provide a brief overview of the report?
Sure. Thank you, Acting Mayor and Council. So this is the subsequent portion of the original OCP amendment you considered at last meeting to include the zoning portion now to correspond with the changes in the OCP. So just a brief touch up on the OCP. The proposal is to amend the dwelling unit distribution chart in the neighborhood plan, and then change the development district land use categories to accommodate for the desired proposed density. And then with respect to the zoning, the changes that are occurring are we are proposing to add a new set of regulations for the 2-family residential development, so the duplexes, and the corresponding zoning regulations for that. And then deleting the development concept plan maps and replacing them with new maps to provide the designation for the various development pods that are being proposed. And then we are being the applicant. The text amendment to the low density multifamily district to update minimum parcel size requirements. This was just a text amendment to the zoning that was adopted for the Parnaby Road, just to ensure that the height represented in Parnaby's actually the parcel size is 4 hectares for Parnaby and a different parcel size requirement for these new parcels. And then establishing a density for the pod F, which would be the condo development parcel at 40 units per hectare, and including the regulations for that in the multifamily designation. So at the end of the day, as indicated in the previous report, the proposal at this point is 10 single-family lots, 18 duplexes, 54 multifamily townhomes, and 60 condo units. So basically, they're looking at providing a mix of dwelling types, whereas currently the lands are primarily designated for the single-family residential estate lots, which are typically larger size single-family lots.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Can I get a motion that council gives second reading to City of Cranbrook Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 4124, 2023, as amended, and authorize staff to refer to the Advisory Planning Commission for recommendation and schedule a public hearing for the proposed amendments for October 16th, 2023. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Popoff. Discussion. Councillor Stetsky. I see Councillor Price will be after that.
I'm going to continue to oppose developments that are anywhere from 10 to 14 kilometers outside downtown Cranbrook. There will be long-term maintenance costs. There are lift stations, there's environmental costs with people back and forth into town, and potentially an ask for transit, I would think. And I was reminded at UBCM this week when I attended a housing conference, there was a caution that communities need to be careful that in the urgent field to provide housing, which we certainly need to do, that in the end they aren't making decisions that are not in the long-term best interest of their communities.
Mayor Price.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm supporting this amendment. The amendment's consistent with and supported by the city's OCP to start with. Further, it aligns with council's strategic planning goals. Firstly, to continue to build a safe and vibrant community in which to live and work. And secondly, create a supportive environment for growth in housing and economic development. So, that in itself, we have a housing shortage, and everybody's concerned about a housing shortage. We've certainly some developers are addressing that, but it's not at the rate we need it to be happening. So this is certainly part of a solution to our housing shortage. Secondly, I think just recently we did our first rounds of budget discussions. I think it's pretty clear to everybody in the room that we need to expand our tax base. And, I think there's some significant undertakings forthcoming. Where's the money coming from? So we certainly need to expand our limited tax base with new tax dollars. I don't think we have a choice. We have to support it. And it's not only the choice. This subdivision was approved and taken into the city in 2005. We've been going around since 2005, and it's sooner or later, a council better support the development because it's been back and forth over years. If we just continue to ignore the developers, that are coming in good faith, and I mean that's significant. There's almost 500 properties going to be developed out there. That is considerable new tax revenues. How long do we keep kind of lack of commitment, so to speak, hedging here and there, till these developers say, you know what, Cranbrook doesn't really want to play. We'll take our money somewhere else. And I can tell you for a fact that I've already spoken to one developer that they're at a point where some of their backers are saying, if either Cranbrook's in or out, because we need a decision on some of these things, or we'll take our money somewhere else. And I don't think we want a reputation like that. So anyways, I'm in support of this. I don't think that this council has any choice but to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Price. Anything further from council? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Stetsky is opposed. And can I get a motion that council give first reading to City of Cranbrook zoning bylaw amendment number 4125, 2023? Can I get a mover? Moved by Councillor Popoff, seconded by Councillor Graham. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Stetsky is opposed. Can I get a motion that council give second reading of City of Cranbrook zoning bylaw amendment 4125, 2023, authorize staff to refer to the Advisory Planning Commission for recommendation and schedule a public hearing for the proposed amendments for October 16th, 2023. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Graham. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Stetsky is opposed. Thank you, Rob. All right, moving on to item 6.2. The next bylaw for consideration tonight is the false alarm bylaw number 4126, 2023. This bylaw is back before council for adoption. Can I get a motion that council adopt the a false alarm bylaw number 4126, 2023? Moved by Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor Stetsky. Discussion? I had one question. If this bylaw is passed, how are we going to educate the local business owners about its implementation?
We have the council, acting mayor through the council. We have the council highlights package that will go over the adoption of this. So we'll be pushed out to the community. And then I can work with Chris as well on doing a communication rollout with the specific bylaw, if that's a council's desire to educate them. And that we definitely can do that.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Okay, moving on to new business. The first item is from Engineering and Development Services regarding the RDEK bylaw. Can I ask engineering to please provide a brief overview of the report?
Sure. Hi again, acting mayor and council. So this referral from the regional district is for a proposed bylaw amendment for a property adjacent to the Gold Creek College campus for the placement of a cellular tower on those lands. They are just on the periphery of the city. However, our current policies or bylaws do not speak to cell towers and their locations. So hence the recommendation, the way it's written. I do note that I do believe it's right next door to a cell tower on the college property, but again, that's within our jurisdiction. This is just outside of our jurisdiction. So the bylaw amendment would basically allow for the placement of a tower under their regulations.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Can I get a motion that council advise the RDEK that the City of Cranbrook's interests are unaffected by the proposed amendments of the Rocky View OCP bylaw number 2255, 2010, and that Electoral Area C South Zoning and Floodplain Management Plan number 2913, 2019. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Blissett. Discussion? Okay, sorry, Rob, I did have one question. Obviously, there's going to be a start of a grouping of these two towers, but you're saying that there's nothing we can do to advise the RDK that we don't want to see one tower placed so close to the other one?
Acting Mayor, no, absolutely not. If
Yeah.
council wishes to provide a different comment, by all means. The reason the resolution is written the way as it is because I don't have a policy that I can refer to or bylaw that I can refer to. But certainly if there's a feeling of any kind from council one way or another, you're free to make a different motion and those comments can be provided to the RDK. Absolutely.
Perfect. And then my other train of thought with this parcel of land being so close to city limits, it might be foreseeable that one day this parcel of land might be within city limits. So having the cell tower here, how would that affect development in that parcel of land?
I think and this is just, I'm going to speak anecdotally because again, I don't have a lot of policy or bylaw with respect to the cell towers. I think from experience with the cell towers that we have, they basically lease a smaller footprint for a piece of land. So, say one day the lands were to come in the city and the cell tower was there, I don't necessarily think it would preclude development. I mean, it might potentially be an issue for people who don't want to live next to a cell tower. Either for a variety of reasons, they can be controversial, but certainly, development could, in theory, happen around it. We have them in our industrial parks. We have one on a highway. We have one on the college campus within city limits, and development does continue to go around them. It's trickier, certainly, when you have a higher population of residents or people and properties in place, and then you go try to put a cell phone tower in. So it's kind of one of those situations where it's a pre or post situation scenario.
Okay, thank you for your explanation. Okay, I'll call the question. If council votes in favor, we'll move on, and if not, we'll make another motion. All in favor? Carried. Moving on to item 8.2. The next item is from Public Works regarding the City Hall boiler. Can I ask Public Works to please provide a brief overview of the report?
Yeah, so basically we had the City Hall boiler fail, internal failure, the heat exchanger. So that basically required a replacement of the boiler. Going into the fall season, we had to proceed under an emergency repair, and and it'll be repaired under the facility reserve.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Can I get a motion that council receive the report for information? Moved by Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor Stetsky. Discussion. Okay, Tony, really quick. The price of the boiler came out at just over $86,000. Did that seem reasonable to you, or was that like price quite inflated due to like increase in prices of COVID? Just wondering if you had a comment on that.
We did a similar installation a few years ago, and if my memory recalls, it might have been in the $50,000 range. They are big boilers, and we also went to a 2-boiler system in this case, which provides redundancy and efficiency on the installation. So I don't think in today's construction world it's out of line.
Okay, thank you. All right, all in favor? Carried. The next item is from Finance regarding the 2024-2028 permissive tax exemption for the Cranbrook Golf Club. Can I ask Finance to please provide a brief overview of the report?
Thank you, Acting Mayor Peabody. So permissive tax exemption is awarded by bylaw. The bylaw must be in front of BC assessment adopted by October 31st. So this is the first of 2 reports. the Cranbrook, relating to permissive tax exemptions, the Cranbrook Golf Course is finishing off a second 5-year permissive tax exemption agreement with the city. They had 3 prior 10-year agreements. The golf course has essentially had an exemption since 1984. The most recent exemption was under Section 225 of the Community Charter. That section is geared really more towards properties that where there's a service being conducted that the city might otherwise consider providing themselves. And back in 1984, it probably made some sense. I don't know if that was the rationale for providing the exemption, but in likelihood, this was at least part of it. It made some sense that a golf course was another amenity that the city was able to provide, but rather than them providing the service, they, in essence, partnered with the club to provide that service, and in exchange provided a permissive tax exemption. That's really no longer applicable in the city of Cranbrook. So what I'm recommending is that the golf course be moved to the to align with the regular permissive tax exemptions under Section 224. So under that section, the city's policy applies with more guidelines than it would have under Section 225. So in my opinion, this is really where the golf course belongs. This is where other municipalities exempt their golf courses, is under Section 224. And the change to the golf course would essentially mean an exemption maxed out at 50% per the policy for recreational facilities versus the 75% they had in the existing permissive tax exemption. The course has, or the club, I guess, has asked for a 5-year exemption again. We do, I would consider, or I would recommend that council consider that. It is within the legislation to award up to a 10-year permissive tax exemption. Our permissive tax exemption program typically revolves around annual applications, and we have had some discussions with BC Assessment, for example, to say, you know, is there some benefit to maybe considering other longer-term permissive tax exemptions? And in their experience, it's not necessarily advisable because of the cap, for example. So you have to continue to manage the cap over that 5 years. In addition to that, properties exchange hands. And if it's no longer being put to the same use, then the tax exemption disappears. So from an administrative perspective, it's much more difficult to keep track of multi-year exemptions. Having said that, the Cranbrook Golf Course would be one of several, and staff is recommending that the 5-year exemption be considered by council.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte. Can I get a motion that council consider an exemption under Section 224 of the Community Charter on property located at 2700 2nd Street South, owned by the Cranbrook Golf Club, and that council directs staff to incorporate the exemption of the city's annual permissive tax exemption bylaw being brought forward for 3 readings at the regular open meeting of council on October 16th, 2023. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Popoff. Councillor Stetsky.
Yep, thank you. I think this is a good first step, but so once it is under Section 224, we can have further discussion around what we think is appropriate, or is it automatically going to go to 50%? Because from my perspective, they should only be tax exempt for the months that they are open to the public to use. And outside of that, there is no benefit to the public for the balance of the year unless they decide to do what many golf courses have done, and that's open it up for cross-country skiing or walking or other public activities. So would that decision be made after, assuming we approve this, then that kind of discussion?
Councillor Stetsky through Mayor Peabody. The policy, and it's council's policy, is up to 50%. So if council chooses to say 25%, that's within your purview.
Councillor Blissett.
Thank you. So is this because this is a non-profit organization that they're able to get the tax exemption? And further to that, are the other golf courses profit organizations, so they're not getting the tax exemption?
That is exactly correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Popoff.
Yes, thank you. So, pardon me. I would consider this summertime use, similar to Kisa Sports Dome, wintertime use. They're both non-for-profits. They're run by societies, right? Certainly, you make a good point, Councilor Stetsky, that maybe we want to scale it if it's only part-time throughout the season. And I mean, I think also it was also back in the time when this policy was established, that was when we just had the one golf course in Cranbrook. So it was a service to the community. Let's review this and see where we want to go forward in the future.
Councillor Graham.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess the question I have, which I don't see anything here, is just, is this, if this exemption changes, does it shut them down? Like, are they on that tight of a string where 14,000 or makes a difference? So I'm just curious about that.
Councillor Graham through Mayor Peabody. Probably not, but that's my, very objective assessment. My understanding is they have about 500 members. So if they have that many members, it's $10 more in their membership fees. I don't know how their membership would feel about that. I don't know if the 500 members is correct, but they would have to collect it from their members or increase traffic over their course.
Councillor Ray.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. I think this is an appropriate recommendation in terms of good governance. It's consistency in terms of our policy. I think it's folks in the public in general would agree that it's consistent and transparent. So I'll be supporting the motion.
Okay, great discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Okay, moving on to item 8.4. The next item is also from Finance regarding the 2024 permissive property tax exemptions. Can I ask Finance to please provide a brief overview of the report?
Mayor Peabody, as I mentioned previously, this is the second of two permissive tax exemption reports coming forward to council. The exemptions need to be approved and adopted. The bylaw rather needs to have 3 readings and adopted by October 31st. There's a list of applicants attached to the report. We have a cap in the permissive tax exemption policy, 1% of the prior year tax levy. I do have a recommendation, not a formal recommendation, but a suggestion that we maybe revisit that policy and align the language in that policy in terms of the cap with the grants and aid policy, so that there's no confusion. The grant and aid policy, the cap does not include the road dedicated tax portion of the taxes that we collect. So it's about, it's slightly less. So there's that suggestion out there that we do that. But other than that, it is capped at I think it's $297,000 for 2024. Or $300,000, just over $300,000, pardon me. It is slightly higher than the grants. And the other thing that's, a little maybe worth noting here is that leasees or occupiers of city-owned land, they receive a permissive tax exemption. This became a little bit of a problem when we originally introduced the cap, because a lot of these organizations had been exempt from taxes for many, many, many years. And at one point in the first year, we actually exceeded the cap. And what that did was it caused everyone in the pool to be taxed 15% of their assessed value. So some of these organizations that had never seen a tax notice before suddenly saw a tax notice. And in, working through that, quite frankly, unintended consequence, which I'm sure some of you have heard me say before, it comes full circle to these are leases on city-owned property that if there were no leasee on that property, there would be no taxes collected on it anyway. So that's the rationale for in the policy separating those particular properties out from the cap. So because as you can imagine, if there was some trouble for those organizations to pay those taxes, the only place it would end up back is with the city. And bearing in mind that if those people were not sitting on that property or leasing that property, it would be there would be no tax collected on it anyway. So there is a little bit of that wrinkle in terms of the cap. So we are well below the $300,000 cap once we exclude the city-owned properties. So there were a couple of new applications. So just on that note, actually, most of our applications are repeat applicants. And so we highlight new applications. There were two. One was from the Community Support Society, Nexus Community Support Society. The 2024 municipal tax exemption is estimated at $3,774. And the principal use of the property is to house and support 4 individuals with diverse abilities. The individuals who reside in this residence receive 24/7 supports as provided by the organization. And then the second application is from the Ktunaxa Nation Council Society. The 2024 municipal tax exemption is estimated to be $2,849. The principal use of the property is to offer emergency shelter focusing on Ktunaxa, Métis, Indigenous individuals. The shelter is open to all members of the public. And then for one app for 2024, there was an application received that is ineligible. This was also from the Ktunaxa Nation Council Society. The property isn't open yet, so it's by that criteria alone, it is not eligible.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte. Can I get a motion that council receives the list of 2024 permissive property tax exemption applications and directs staff to bring forward for 3 readings the annual taxation exemption bylaw based on the information in the attached list of eligible applicants and any changes to the list resulting from council's discussion? Moved by Councillor Lissette, seconded by Councillor Stetsky. Discussion. No discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Right. Now, item 8.5. The next item is also from the CAO's office regarding budget 2024, direction to administration. Can I ask Mark to please provide a brief overview of the report?
Thank you, Acting Mayor. So back to this report we brought forward last time. I won't go through all of the details as I did last time. However, the concept is around providing guidance to staff as we begin to work on what will be a very difficult budget year. So again, as administration, we're going to work to keep the costs as low as possible, but we are dealing with a very difficult environment in which to control costs or to project costs for some things that, we talked about in great detail in the last meeting. So in order to sort of give staff an indication of what are the things that are sort of more like the basic operation, water, sewer, garbage, the public safety, all of those sort of core services, maintenance of our infrastructure, those are what we will always put the most weight on. But then when it comes to sort of where we're heading as a city and what are the things that council sees as priority objectives that have been talked about, some at UBCM and some at council in the strap plan, some are newer and causing more pressure, such as the homelessness issue. There's just, what are the things that council feels are sort of the higher priority items? And that gives us direction that if we have to make some difficult decisions internally as we work through the budget, we kind of know where we should not be cutting and where potentially then we can think about some of the areas we could present to council for either reduction in service or a drop in service or removal of a service where we know, they may be on that fringe, in order to ensure that the things that are important to council are being covered. So I just don't want to go into those discussions with staff and not have that sort of higher level direction from council. So the first item is really, what are your top 3 priorities for the next year? If I could get those in quite a general sense. And then after that, once we get to that, we'll talk about the budget percent or increases or the process, whether it's a top down or bottom up delivered budget process through the year. But if we could start, if there's some way to manage just a bit of a process through gaining the top 3 priorities of council that we know are the things that we should look to do better on and potentially increase and certainly not cut in the next year's budget, that would be wonderful.
Okay. I'll put a motion on the table with 3 priorities. And then after discussion, we can amend that motion to what council's decision is. So can I get a motion that council provide council's top 3 strategic priorities for 2024? The first one being infrastructure renewal and maintenance. Second one being community safety and well-being. And the third one being economic development and diversification. For administration to develop the 2024 budget and business plan. Can I get a mover? Moved by Councillor Popoff. Seconder? Councillor Ray? Discussion. Councillor Stetsky.
And I thought we were giving our individual top 3 priorities as part of this meeting. And will I share a little bit of what you proposed? I don't necessarily have those 3 as the top priorities. So how do you want to proceed?
I think what we're trying to do here is come together as a council to determine what the council's top 3 priorities are. So I put 3 on the table to start the discussion. And then now that we're able to have this discussion, so if you want, Councillor Stetsky, if you have your top 3 priorities, we can write them down and then go from there.
Sure. So my top 3, number 1 is housing, and that's everything from people living without roofs to seniors housing to low income housing, and quite frankly, housing to support working families. Second one was around community safety. And when I use that word, it is everything from personal safety around crime, but also community safety when it comes to kind of my 3rd priority, which is around climate change. And that's trying to make sure that the city is protected as best we can from forest fires, that our infrastructure is looking towards some of the events that seem to be almost inevitable these days around heavy rainfalls, flooding, etc. So my 3 were housing, community safety, and preparing and working to prevent some of the challenges of climate change.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blissett.
Thank you. And I appreciate what you've done, Acting Mayor Peabody, because I do think we need some framework to work from. So I agree with your first 2 items about maintaining and looking after our core infrastructure as well as community safety. I would change the 3rd one though. We do have to be working on climate change we must. So I think that should be our 3rd priority as opposed to economic development, because there is no economic development if we don't deal with what we have to do to protect our city from fire and to make sure that our utilities and that are able to function in our community.
Go around the table. Councillor Graham.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with your community safety. That was definitely one that I had marked down even from the start last time. Economic development, I think, is critical. And rather than just looking at it as a big balloon, I think economic development needs to be boiled down into density and looking at density bonusing, looking at taxation or taxation relief on high density builds. I think we just can't say economic development and then not have any kind of management behind it. And then my second one is, I guess it would fall under building services, which is a focus on getting this OCP done. And then from that, driving zoning changes and subdivision bylaws that we can update along with the OCP. I think that's critical. That ties into a lot of the things that we're looking at. So those are the three things. I don't know how you want to frame the OCP one, but that was.
Okay, Councillor Popoff.
Yes, thank you. Some great discussions. I'm looking at this as what do we already have in the works that staff and council are already directing? And when we're talking about safety, I think we're well in the way of working on all those things, from the wildfire fronts to our cell and our outreach workers, and how we've worked with bylaw and other pieces with our emergency services to move those things forward and see some improvement. Now, do we want, if we want it on the list in the top three, then we need to come up with staff what those other urgent matters are to further enhance on the safety pieces. And what I've heard so far was we're already working on those, and we should maybe let those play out and look at some of the primary things within city control that we really haven't devoted time to. That's also reflected in our strategic plan. So my list, and I like the motion you put on the floor, Acting Mayor, it's about housing. It's about the missing middle housing in particular, because that's what we can have some direct actions on, especially after we do our OCP, and where do we want targeted locations and targeted densification in the city. Also where we don't want to have development in the city. So the missing middle. The other part of that would be on the infrastructure side. Once we do have our OCP and we know where this targeted purpose built is, how do we go forward with the infrastructure alignment with that so that we can actually go and get that done, hopefully at some point within this term. And then the last point was, and it was mentioned before, well, we're growing too slow, 1.8 or whatever %. And that comes back to the lack of industrial commercial lands, and importantly, the lack of purpose-built housing that we need. So I would like us to continue with economic development as it relates to continuing to provide growth and prosperity in our community. And we're working on it, but I don't know if we've targeted that as something special for this time around. I could go on, but those are my top three.
Okay, Councillor Ray.
Thank you. So I also identified housing, and I think that's housing for housing's sake, that people need somewhere to live. But, and when I say housing, I assume that that includes the necessary infrastructure. So that might be cheating a little bit because it's a 2-in-1, but I think those, I'm putting those together. And then linked to housing is economic development. We all know we're coming up to a challenging budget season. We can certainly do our very best to control expenses, but our other strategy is to increase income. And to do that, economic development is part of that, but to have economic development, we need people to have places to live so they can come here to work. So in addition to housing, I would identify economic development. And then the third one I identified was social challenges, which I think probably fits under your
Community safety.
Community safety. And so can you just please run the three by me that are in the motion on the table?
So the motion on the table is infrastructure renewal and maintenance, community safety and well-being, and economic development and diversification. Yes, please.
Brief supplemental. I certainly appreciate where Councillors Stetsky and Blissett are coming from in terms of the environment and climate change. Could we consider having 4 priorities with that as a 4th priority?
Yes.
Actually, that Councillor Ray, thank you. So what I was seeing was exactly what you're seeing is I used 3 just to get some semblance of priority, rather than, like I said, staff are still going to use council's full strat plan as guidance, but to really put a finer point on what's really important. And what I'm seeing here is we could save a lot of conversation tonight is if we just say top 5, because really all of these can be grouped into 5 categories on everything that's on the floor so far, unless Councillor Bissett introduces something new. I think we've nailed within 5, so 3 was just an arbitrary number to put a finer point. If we can avoid a lot of discussion, this is the kind of direction staff really needed prior to embarking on the tough work ahead that we have to do before we come back. And we'll touch many more times with council through the budget process, but there's so much work that we can do behind the scenes with this level of guidance from council on what's important. So top 5 would work just fine.
Okay, Councilor Blissett.
If I could offer a comment, sorry.
Sorry, Mayor Price.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I agree with Mark. Certainly, a top 3 is probably more appropriate. I agree with pretty well what everybody has said tonight, but certainly number 1, with any council, your core infrastructure, by the very nature of a corporation, has to be priority 1. But I have also got social issues, and with my social issues, that included public safety and support for bylaw services. And then I had, and that would also bring in, the social issues would bring in the housing development strategy and implementation for seniors and low-income workers. And then finally, I had increase in commercial and industrial tax base, and that basically boils down to we need to take a more aggressive approach to our economic development. I certainly, it was apparent to me after the first round of budget discussions here that over the next 5 years, we've got to generate some revenue, and that's a significant revenue if we're going to even come close to meeting the needs for the basics of the community. So I think that economic development and taking a much more aggressive approach on how we're confronted it right now. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Blissett.
Thank you. I guess what I'd like staff to keep in mind is that, I mean, we've already started talking about budget, and we need to do the essentials, not expand what we're doing as the city. I think we're at that point in our budgeting process that we really can't afford to do anything other than essentials. Certainly our planning department will be working on housing and increasing densification in the city, but I do think that I'm very concerned, and this will lead into our next part, is on how much we're going to be asking the Cranbrook taxpayer to pay, because it's not just us, it's going to be then the regional district and all their wishes. And then it goes from there, and we know that people are under pressure financially, and we need to really respect that. So I'm very concerned about that, and that's just a segue into part 3 there.
Okay. Councilor Stetsky.
Yeah, thank you. And my infrastructure absolutely is critical, but I thought early on you said that the plan is to continue with basic operations, basic infrastructure, making sure that they're sound, which is why I didn't put it on the top of my list. I thought you kind of suggested you were going to do that anyway.
Yes, and so similar to Councillor Brissett's comments, there's a lot of things that, we do have taken as a given, like, those are sort of things that we'll do. What I'm looking for here is just some real good, meaty discussion with council on what are your priorities for the year ahead. And things like infrastructure maintenance is always something that we're striving for, as you saw the restructuring around, ensuring that good quality infrastructure is going into the ground these days versus, some of the stuff that went in the past that causes main trunks to blow out like we just had, to avoid those challenges for future councils and future staff by ensuring we have good quality infrastructure, that we maintain it. We're doing that now. Secondly, as Councillor Brissett pointed out, like, we're entering a very challenging budget year. And what I'm talking about is the cost increases to maintain existing services as they are. And likely we're going to be proposing things not to expand, but rather the other way. And that's why I need to know what are sort of the things that are important to council that we may look to add to that we're currently not doing. And that may be like, what you're going to hear about in the admin update, some of the costs around managing the homeless encampments. If council's not supportive of that, that's a service we need to talk about, because otherwise it's something that was new that we brought in this year through the camping bylaw. That's an expansion of service, as you use that term. Nothing else that we do, we're not doing those any kind of increase or expansion. It's simply the costs of providing the service, as it were last year, in some cases are up significantly just due to factors, we talked about last time quite in detail. I don't really want to go through it all, but you guys heard it all from me last time.
All right, Councillor Popoff.
Yes, thank you. So it was an interesting exercise. And what I'm realizing is what we just identified in the last 10 minutes is pretty much what's in our strategic plan. We haven't really honed in on anything new or special, and some of it we refer or deferred because we're waiting for the OCP and certain changes and other work from maybe staff to give us some best practices. But I think we just identified that we like this, the way we set the priorities within our strategic plan, and I didn't hear anything unique come out of this. So is this giving you more direction, Mark, compared to just what we talked about during our strategic plan?
Well, yes. So, the community safety discussion has taken, some new angles, and as has housing has arisen, I think, in its priority ranking, in the conversations with council members, that I think that one has gained a bit more prominence. So, and I think, economic development for the purposes of generating tax revenue in the face of, increasing costs, I think that's a new take on an old story, I guess, for lack of a better term. But this was the conversation I was looking to have. It's very helpful for us because, as I said, we're going to be entering a difficult budget conversation, and I don't want to be arbitrarily talking about reducing or removing something that is in an area that council feels is one of their priorities. That's what I want to avoid.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Mayor Price, you still have a hand showing. Did you have another comment?
No, I'll remove my hand.
Thank you. Councillor Stetsky, then Councillor Ray.
Do we need an amendment or anything to move to 5 priorities then, rather than 3?
We will. Maybe we'll hear from Councillor Ray first, and then someone can make an amendment.
I was wanting to make that amendment.
Okay.
If we could add, it sounds like, if I'm hearing the table correctly, add climate change and housing.
Yep.
I think I was the seconder, so I'm okay with that.
All right. So yeah, the amendment, Councillor Stetsky and Councillor Ray. Any further discussion on this? Call the question. All in favor? Carried.
Oops. Sorry, acting mayor, just one thing I just wanted to mention, like those that attended UBCM. So the concept around climate change, climate change adaptation for infrastructure renewal to ensure that we're better buffered against major storm events and the things that you might see, wildfire. So that's a whole area of changing legislation at the provincial level that our deputy chief presented about, that the resources for us to respond to the regulatory requirements that communities are going to get in terms of being prepared for environmental emergencies is changing. And that's an area, an example where we might be looking at, we'll propose adding some resources there, because that is something that's critical. It's been identified by council now, but it's also becoming a provincial requirement. So those that were at UBCM sat through that session. Those that haven't, we're going to bring back more information about what that provincial update is all about. So I just wanted to point that out as the relevance of this conversation in a sort of a very relevant example.
Okay, thank you, CAO for Joe. And now I have 2 other potential motions. Marnie, should I read both of them and council can decide if they want to put one on the table? Does that make, sorry, Councillor Ray?
I would like to move motion 2.
Okay. Councillor Ray, can I get a motion that council provides staff with a maximum tax increase of?
It's number, so the first one,
Okay,
that
it's number
council supports
1 of the
staff
book.
development. Yeah.
Can I get a motion that council supports staff developing a budget that could exceed the 5-year projections, making every effort to keep the budget increase as low as possible to deliver existing services and meet council priorities for presentation to council for consideration? Can I get a mover? Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Popoff. Discussion? Sorry, Councillor Ray, and speak to the motion, and then Councillor Stetsky.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. So, I'm sure all of us around the table would agree that we want to be making decisions that are based on evidence and knowledge. So for myself, I do not have the knowledge that I could in good conscience say X amount, X percentage is the top tax increase. I do not have that knowledge or expertise to be able to set that amount. Our management and staff team do have that knowledge. So I definitely want our budgeting process to be fiscally responsible, absolutely, and that we're going to have to make some difficult decisions. But in good conscience, I don't feel, I would not be able to feel good about saying this is a hard number cap on a budget increase. Having said that, I fully support that we need to be very fiscally responsible and work hard together to make that happen.
Councillor Stetsky.
Yeah, I'm trying to, and I guess I'll turn it back to Mark. I certainly understand what Council Ray is saying. Where does that leave you and your staff?
Well, so here's the challenge, I guess, that we run into every year with budgeting. If there's a disparity between what council is thinking and what staff are finding. So if we, if we're in a high cost environment and come back with a budget increase, it depends. Every community is different. The tolerance for tax increases is different in different communities. Some communities, 2%, 3% has been the norm. And so you come with 5%, council says, well, you need to bring that down to 2%. Or, in this case, we're already talking over 5%. We're talking the potential here with cost increases. It could be, potentially above, getting up towards 10%. And, we're going to work towards cutting that number down as much as we can internally. But if we do the next 2 months worth of work on developing budgets and it comes in at, say, 8% or 9%, and council then is shocked and says, we want 4%. And so then we are left with 2 weeks to do a lot of work adjusting programs, services, budget documents in a very rushed and unprofessional way to get the numbers down to what council had in their mind. So rather than playing that game, which happens a lot when there's, like I'm just saying, this is an unprecedented year of cost increases, and we know that we're going to be challenged, and so that's why I'm asking for council's priorities, so then I know where we as staff can propose some cuts within or service reductions within in order to keep it as low as possible and not offend council that we've removed something that council felt was a priority. That's one. That's my first line. Second line is to be as close as I can when we finally get to present you with budget documents that we're not way out to lunch with what you were thinking. So if council as a group right now is thinking 2%, I can tell you we're looking at pretty significant cuts, and staff needs the next couple months to work on that. And I'd rather have the next 2 months working on that than I would have to try to figure that out in 2 weeks in November. And so that's kind of what I'm saying. So what I presented is there are significant cost factors, and this is going to be a very difficult year. The post-COVID years, I've been working in municipal government for longer than I care to admit. I've been a CAO for like getting on 15 years now. This post-COVID cost environment is the most unpredictable and runaway pricing on some things that I've ever seen in my career in trying to deliver budgets. It's very difficult. And so I just don't want to be misaligned with council when I come to you with budget documents.
Councillor Blissett and then Mayor Price.
Thank you. So right now the projection is 5.87, and I believe that's what staff should be targeting. I'm not comfortable with 8%, 10%. I just don't think we can put that on our taxpayers. And in previous years of doing budgeting, we've started off with a figure, say like 5.8%, and then in budget discussions, that's come down every single year. So I'm hoping that we can do that again. Now, maybe as you say, now is different than the last 9 years, but I would think you should be going for the 5.8%. I would not, I can't approve going ahead for 8, 10%. off the top. I do think we need to be, as you were saying, maybe cutting back in services, cutting back in what projects we're going to do in light of that. So that's where I come from.
Mayor Price.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate what Councillor Lissette said, but you know that 5.8, you know, that was a projection, you know, in a 5-year plan. You know, I've been involved in budgeting in the city of Cranbrook now since 2005, you know, every year, and the 5-year plan. And I can almost assure you that in the 5-year plan, the only reality was year 1. Year 2, 3, 4, and 5 have never come in at that rate, because you're right. Now is different. Now is different than last year when we set something last year, and I can almost guarantee you, probably in the last couple of months of issues that I think that we're seeing maybe are coming forward, that makes it increasingly different and difficult. So I, you know, quite frankly, I don't think there's a chance that we can come in at 5.8% without turning this city almost upside down. I mean, we're going to be eliminating services. We're going to be eliminating projects that I think are probably critical projects. If you look at what's on the books, and I think we saw last week, we're pretty much critical. There's no fluff anymore. You know, I have a real fear of double digits, that's for sure. But, you know, I personally, I don't think 5.8 is a reality, just on some of the discussions we've had recently, guys. And I guess I would ask Charlotte and maybe Mark, and of course, coming from the UBCM, have you talked to other communities, and are they speculating what they may be coming in around? I know I've talked to a couple of people in other communities, you know, and, you know, they're up at the high end of the single digits for sure. And, you know, we saw what happened to Lake Country last year, 17%. I believe the city of Vancouver mayor has said that, you know what, they're probably looking at 10% this year. And you know what, it could be 10, maybe we have to accept 10% for a number of ongoing years, I think is something along that line. So, you know, yeah, I think that we're going to, and, you know, we really haven't seen everything that's come to the table. I don't think it's fair. It's a little bit premature right now that finance hasn't had a chance to really crunch those numbers and see what we're coming in at for this year, not based on last year's speculation. So again, Mark and Charlotte, have we got any indicators from other communities on what they may be looking at? And you know what, and I hate to look at the ones in the immediate area, you know, like Sparwood and Fernie and Elkford and those ones who have that industrial base that's heavily supported, you know, by a large corporation. That, let's be honest, that's apples and oranges. Thank you.
CFO Osborne.
Your worship, through your acting worship. I haven't had a chance to have discussions with anyone in our region at this point. As you said, you know, the Elk Valley is a bit of its own animal, so you know that's kind of neither here nor there really. Certainly, I've read the you know, the news pieces, and I'm aware that many communities are looking at close to double-digit, if not double-digit increases, and not just for this year. Some of them are certainly suggesting several years out of those types of increases. But I haven't spoken to anyone specifically.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Councillor Popoff and Councillor Stetsky.
Yes, thank you. So first of all, I don't think anyone around council is going to be demanding give us a 2% budget, a 4% budget. You know, the 5 point is Councillor Bissett calling. I think that was the number we heard before we started to have the staff coming to us and identifying new critical asks for borrowing and or tax increases. So I think the 5.8 was the floor, and now we're getting more asks. We need to say what are critical for those, which ones can we defer, kick them forward, and what are the threats should we not fund them right now. Yeah, Your Worship, I think you're right. From what I heard at UBCM, people were rolling their eyes and talking about some double digits in medium and big communities, and I think we may be having to have Mark ask you to make those critical priority decisions. If we were to defer things forward, what's the threat of doing some of those things? And what does it come back to our critical priorities, especially if we don't want to stagnate as a community and continue to grow and prosper? So I think it's a challenge for you, Mark, and but with your skill set and years of experience, I think you have it. And even though we say a certain thing right now, we're not held to it. We could come back and 2 weeks into the final budget and say, no, we've changed our minds. So what we say to you is unofficial.
If I could just, Acting Mayor, through to Councillor Popoff, thank you for that. And it's true, council can change direction at any given time. We're not creating a bylaw here. What I'm just looking for is some guidance so we can do better quality work over the next few months. And, I've been through some periods of shrinkage, let's just say, in northern communities when you have a major industrial partner shut down. And there are difficult decisions to be made if you want a lower tax increase to provide the critical services that you need to provide to residents and maintain the things that you feel are priorities, but still meet a lower budget percent increase. The problem is that when we cut or reduce services, taxpayers are unhappy about those things, and council needs to stand behind those decisions. Then, if we want to maintain a lower tax increase, when the angry members of the public are phoning, we need to be all unified in saying why we have reduced or removed that service rather than create the tax increase. So that's the other side of this conversation that we have to be cognizant of.
Councillor Stetsky.
I know we're looking at option 2, but maybe you'll get the information you'll need and then we can adopt option 2 because you'll have all the information you need. So Mark, if council would agree, for example, that 5.8 is the basement and that we all agree that in the end, and I will not speak on behalf of my council members, that 5.8 is a reasonable place to start. And then how difficult would it be for you to then work with staff to tell us what, say, a 7.8 and a 9.8? I'm not going to say 10 ever. What the implications are, what more could be done with those kinds of increases, so that it gives you sort of room to work, but to bring back information to council where we can then make some of those decisions, if 5.8 is a reasonable base for council members.
Councillor Stetsky through Acting Mayor Peabody. I guess what I would say to that is the way we would structure the budget is we're going to try to deliver the services that council expects that were delivered last time. And that will be the number that we're hoping to get, somewhere around the 5.8%, but it potentially could be higher. And then you'll be given options of the things that we would like to add. And you're going to be given options then of the things that we would think of removing. And that would be the conversation rather than having whole suites of packages of, as you couched it, sort of like adding money would allow us to do more. My concern right now is what is the cost of providing the service that you had last year? And can we achieve that as the number one thing under, double-digit increases? So if whatever that number is, that's the floor. And then from there, we will ask this next item, if we're going to add this additional resource or service is going to increase the taxes that amount. And then you can choose what to not add. But we will then, with this information, knowing how tight it is and what the floor is, we'll be proposing things that we think might be removed or reduced in order to achieve that. So that's kind of the conversation I need to have. It's just a scale. And like I think Councillor Popoff said it best, I'm just looking for something better than radio silence and going into the budget process with staff with complete darkness from the council side of the table when it's a very challenging year. We do have the budget priorities from council. We know council's direction overall. We know council's desire in running an efficient business, but as I said, it's just a very unusual year for challenges. So I wanted a little deeper discussion now rather than waiting till the end of the budget process.
CFO Osborne.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. So along those lines, I just would like to run a little bit down a rabbit hole to show you the sort of, as an example of some of the challenges. It isn't just new services such as homeless camp cleanup. Our policing agreement is $108,000 higher than it was, will be $108,000 higher in 2024 than we were told it would be in 2024 in 2023. So I now have to find $108,000 from where without going above the I believe it's 5.7, Councillor Blissett. 5.7 is the targeted increase for 2024. That does not include that $108,000, for example. So it isn't just about saying yes or no to new services. It is some of the services that we are currently offering that are underwater, if you like. They are not fully funded. So in order to fully fund them, we will need to go above 5.7. We'll need to correct. So it isn't just about saying no to new services or getting rid of an old service because it's being replaced, or a previous service that is perhaps less acutely needed than the new service. You have existing services that are not properly funded, for example.
Councillor Stetsky had a supplemental.
Yeah, I guess that partially answers my question, because my question mark was going to be, I think I hear you saying that 5.7% will mean a reduction in services already.
And that's kind of why I was looking for the priority. So Councillor Stetsky through the acting mayor is I believe to achieve that number, which is providing base services, will require the reduction in some services. Yes. Yeah,
Councillor Graham.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah, thank you. And we've had great discussion. My personal viewpoint on this, and I'm sure no one's going to be shocked, is 5.7 is where I will stand for my ceiling. And if we want more than that, then I want a plan that's going to drive revenue. Where are the ideas and outside the box ways to get building happening in Cranbrook? The feds just cut the GST on higher density builds or built units over 5 units. What are we doing to entice? And are we going to go to density bonusing? Are we going to look at some other tax release? Give me a plan that drives some revenue, and I might consider moving my target up. But if I don't see anything that's going to drive any additional revenue, or at least try to, I'm not going over 5.7.
Okay. Any further comments from council? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Oh. Well, the motion on the table is, can I get a motion that council supports staff developing a budget that could exceed the 5-year projections, making every effort to keep the budget increase as low as possible to deliver existing services and meet council priorities for presentation to council for consideration. That's the motion on the table right now.
And we have a mover and a seconder on that,
Yeah,
correct?
we have a mover and a seconder, Councillor Ray and Councillor Stetsky. Yeah. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Graham, Councillor Blissett is opposed. Motion is carried.
Acting Mayor, I just wonder, just given the level of conversation around the OCP, if I could just ask Rob if council would allow. I think there's some really good news in the OCP update that would be timely for council to hear right now. Just
Okay.
given that discussion, if you don't mind, would you allow us like 2 minutes?
No pressure. Okay, so Mayor and Council, just to give you a very brief update, I can tell you that the draft OCP is on our desk. It's being reviewed by staff. We're providing comments. So we are hopefully going to be at the point of getting to public release in October. One thing that we are waiting for is the status of our HAF application, because if we're successful, we will end up making some additional changes to that to the OCP as part of that program that we'd applied for. But I can tell you with assurance right now, we've taken the direction and discussions on things like housing, food security, climate change. We took it to heart when we started this process with the previous council, the current council. So, we do have policy direction as drafted. Now, I don't want to spill too many beans and get people, going, but all the things that were mentioned, things like density, things like infill, they are captured in the OCP to some level right now. Of course, so we are on that track already. And And then, of course, what that would do obviously would lead to the ability then to, when we proceed with the zoning bylaw, then to make the zoning changes, right, accordingly. And so we are definitely down that path. I can tell you that the draft and is there with those things in it. You know, we again are waiting for the results of the half application. They're starting to trickle in. So, you know, ultimately we'll find out hopefully in the very near future. One thing that we are envisioning planning to do with council, actually, and I discussed this with Mark briefly this morning, is we just received our updated housing needs targets. The final draft is in my hands as well. But we didn't want to just present it to you in a report or like an admin update. What we're hoping to do is set up a committee of the whole meeting with council to have that discussion led by the housing needs assessment that we've got. So to give you that update of kind of the current status of our needs, and then get into the discussion of how we can look at trying to start address those needs through policy and bylaw. And again, we've got two trains of thought with respect to this committee of the whole. One is, if we get half, we're having one discussion. If we don't get the half, then we're having a different discussion. Ultimately, they will end up in the same. Oh, sorry, the Housing Accelerator Fund. Yeah, sorry, half being the Housing Accelerator Fund. It's a lot easier just to say half, and that's what we've been referring it to. But it is the Housing Accelerator Fund. That's a CMHC grant that we provided the action plan for. And so, yeah, with the current workload that we've got going on and in our department, you know, from a budgetary perspective, just as a side note, you know, the OCP's already accounted for in budget, as well as the zoning bylaw update. So those aren't going to be new asks from a budgetary perspective. They're already in the work plan. You know, we're working through those. We found some additional funding to do the housing update, and then of course, you know, if we are successful with that housing accelerator grant, then that will probably will end up bolstering, strengthening even more than what we already kind of have in draft form with respect to issues like housing, of course, and then certainly looking at those other tools and options that were mentioned by Councillor Graham to look at pursuing, you know, once we have the OCP in place, whether we look at, you know, revitalization tax exemptions for densification. You know, we have basic density bonusing provisions. The caveat with something like density bonusing, though, for example, is you have to have a market and demand for density, and you have to have developers who want density in exchange for that. Up to now, with the density bonusing we have, that hasn't been the case in Cranbrook. So, but we can bolster that. There's new tools that are available. You probably heard at UBCM as well with respect to housing, there's going to be some provincial legislation coming down the pipe that's going to essentially change the essence of single family zoning. We're well aware of that. You know, we're keeping our finger on the pulse. So, you know, some of the discussion that we've been having in the direction we're hoping to go might be a moot point because the province might be telling us to do it anyways. So that's you know, in a way, a good thing perhaps, because it's sort of a provincial and national issue. But long story short, it's coming. It's on our desk. We're reviewing it. It's looking really good. I'm really happy with the plan so far, and I'm hoping that we'll get in front of council here in October with that committee of the whole to kind of bring you up to speed on, you know, housing and how it ties in then to our OCP direction and so forth. So it's all in the works and coming, and we're just, you know, waiting on bated breath for that Housing Accelerator Fund announcement, whether we get it or not. And then we'll know which direction we go from there.
Okay. Thank you for the update, Rob. All right, we'll move on to item 8.6. Can I get a motion that council appoint Sheena Rivers to the Cranbrook Public Library Board as representative of the public at large for the term expiring at the organization meeting of council in 2024? Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Popoff. Discussion? All in favor? Carried. And can I get a motion that council appoint Samuel Farrell to the Cranbrook Public Library Board as representative of the public at large for a term expiring at the organization meeting of council in 2024? I got a mover? Moved by Councillor Blissett, seconded by Councillor Graham. Discussion? All in favor? Carried. All right, now moving on to administration updates. We have a handful of administration updates tonight. The first group of updates is from our building and bylaw services. Can I ask Paul to provide the administration updates, please?
I'll just, so your worship through to the rest of council, I'll just give a quick briefing on the cleanup of homeless encampments. Yeah, we're at 12 tents right now at Ridgeview Road. We do have numerous other tent sites throughout their outer perimeters of the city. And at present, the city has spent over $62,000 in cleanup and security this summer. And it's costing the city right now $3,200 a week. And we expect these costs to continue with us and probably until about mid-November. And then we're expecting that it'll be about $91,000 this year to clean up all the homeless encampments and provide security and all the other increased measures that we've had to do in the bylaw department to deal with this mounting issue that's presently upon us. Kootenai Springs building, yes, it has been officially sold. We are in discussions with the new owners about the direction that that new owner wants to take with the Kootenai Springs building. He is going to be fencing it and bringing forward a demolition permit soon. So 1716 4th Street North, back of Save On Foods. Yeah, we've asked for a preliminary review letter with 8 items on it, and we asked for that in January 26th. There's been quite a bit of correspondence recently with them, but in terms of the items that we've asked in the preliminary review letter of all the drawings and their building, they have not responded back to us with a resolvement to the 8 items on that one. And pretty much the same can be said about 2360 Kootenai Street North, where we sent a preliminary review letter to them as well with 7 items. And they got back to us on May 31st. And we did on June 6th also receive a preliminary review letter with them. But there were still 6 outstanding items concerning electrical, landscaping, certain other issues. All of it could be overcome, but so far, nothing has moved since June the 6th. The trains behind the Prestige Inn, we've had quite a bit of discussions with these individuals and been putting a lot of pressure on them. So they are presently considering not moving the trains on the tracks, but they will move the trains physically onto giant loaders. So Gary Southgate, the multimillionaire that is purchasing these for his train museum in Saskatchewan, is right now discussing which trains he wants to haul onto loaders and take up to Saskatchewan. And then our big issue is the weight and the costs. The city will not be bearing any of these costs, but the issue is just right now just getting permits to take these heavy carts onto BC roads and eventually Alberta roads and Saskatchewan roads. And that's really where we're at. It's just waiting on those permits.
Sorry, Paul, I had a question from Councillor Graham.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I was going to wait till you were done because it was back to the very, I had a couple questions throughout your report.
Oh, sorry. Go.
So if you want to just finish off and then I can.
For sure.
All right. We've been in discussions with the folks that own Trailhead Brewery, which was supposed to be located downtown. At this point, just due to budget issues and the high cost of new construction, which we've talked about already tonight, they will not be moving forward with that project. And then,
sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Is that it?
And then, yeah, and Tony, if you want to speak to the Belmont Stairs, you're at the back.
Well, should we have Councillor Graham's
wanna have a
question before we
discussion
carry on with
before that?
Tony? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Just around the cleanup of the homeless encampments. Now, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, the folks back there are intense because there is no room at the inn per se with BC Housing. They don't have beds to provide them, so they're living in tents majority or mainly because of that.
At 4 o'clock every day at the Travel Lodge, there is 7 empty rooms. available for them. And they can leave those rooms. They have to leave those rooms in the morning and check back in at 4 o'clock the next day. So that offer is always open to them to go across the street and check into those rooms.
And are those rooms being utilized?
Yes, they are. But
So-
they're always available the very next day.
Yeah, no,
From
for
time
sure.
to time they are.
But it sounds like they're a bit over capacity. And kind of where I'm going with this is that BC Housing does pay and provide rooms. So I'm wondering why we aren't billing BC Housing for the cleanup, because they're ultimately responsible for housing these people. And unfortunately, the tent is all they can offer at this point. So I think they should bear part of that cleanup cost.
It's so, your worship, through to Councillor Graham, that's a fair argument, and I could ask that of our legal counsel and see how they consider that argument, because I'm sure that's been asked in other communities.
Yeah, I just think that they, essentially they're renting space. Technically, the people are in tents on city land, which BC Housing we could just rent them that space and then charge them the cleanup costs because they don't have enough beds. I think there's got to be a way that we can recover at least part of that cost. My second question was around the buildings that you're talking about on 4th Street or Kootenai Place, and you say there are a few unresolved items, 8 items you had listed. Are those statutory items that need to be done, or are they items that we've kind of put forward because of a bylaw that we could change at council, or something that could be done at this table to help aid them moving forward? Is it something we've created, or is it something that another level of government has mandated us to enforce?
Again, good question. I did look at the list of all the items. It is all, at this point, strictly building code, provincial building code matters that just need to be addressed. It is nothing within the municipality and bylaws that we can change to help assist. Yes, we did look at that.
Councillor Stetsky has a question as well.
Yeah, thank you. A comment first, at UBCM, which we were at last week, there was a resolution passed that BC Housing should be taking complete responsibility for homeless people in British Columbia, because that's a mandate, including managing people in tents. So whether that goes anywhere, I guess we'll wait and see, but it was hopeful. Do you have a number in total, as best you can, of the number of tents then around Cranbrook? I mean, we know there's 12, but in total?
Total is 28.
28 in total? Okay. And it might be more for CEO Furto, but school's back in, the tutor house is still a mess. Any idea where that's at?
So your acting Mayor Peabody, through to Councillor Stetsky, I am presently talking to our legal counsel about rewriting our remedial action order on that space, and that we will restructure it so that is something that we can move on without having to assume the tax liability of one day purchasing that space, which we're looking at probably $600,000 and to properly clean up. That's our assessments. So we want to be treading lightly, but there is certain actions that we could take that to certainly clean it up.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Tony Haytu, you're next.
Thank you, Acting Mayor and Council. I also want to take a bit of an opportunity just to bring forward the weekend repair of the North Water Main trunk. So 3:45 Friday, we received a call about about a major water main break at the top of Park Royal. Staff stuck around at the end of the day to see what type of break this could be and what type of scope, and ended up this was a big one. So it was a 16-inch water main, high pressure water main, directly below the 600 PSI natural gas line that feeds Cranbrook and Kimberley. So this isn't something that you just can just dig up and repair. So staff worked throughout around the clock. Doug had the water line daylighted and actually found that it was a complete length of pipe that had split. So they ended up having to dig up a substantial length of the water line, which we didn't have stock. They through all this, they contacted suppliers in the middle of the night, rented tracked excavators. Anyways, just pulled this sophisticated repair together and had water, the last water on within 24 hours of first finding it. This is just I have a feeling that this could potentially be in the north end of the town without water for up to a week. So I just want to mention that what kind of crew we have. They really came through for us this time.
I want to say too, on behalf of council, that we do also extend our sincere thanks to our public works crew for working tirelessly throughout the night. Their dedication doesn't go unnoticed, and our town is grateful for their hard work.
Thank you, Acting Mayor and Council. And on to the Beaumont Stairs. So Beaumont Stairs is being delayed about a month. So November 6th to the 12th, they're going to be installing the final steel structures. The reason for the delay is when they pulled up the stairs, that's when the assessment comes into place on the existing concrete, and they found the foundations were all good, but they actually have to go back and replace the pile or the concrete between the pilasters and where the steel would go. So the important thing is it's completed for winter, and I feel we're on track for that.
Okay, great. Anything further? Councillor Popoff.
Yes, thank you. So Tony, you mentioned beginning of December, so we will be having winterish conditions prior to that. The students, they have an alternate route that's safe prior to having the stairs up and running?
Yeah, so we marked some signage just before the stairs, and there's a nice pathway that goes down not far from there along the old Baker Park.
Yes. And snow and rain and ice, black ice, it'll still be considered safe for them to navigate? We'll be having snow and ice before beginning of December, I'm certain of it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I will increase our level of service on that unmaintained pathway, or Public Works will.
Okay, thank you, Paul and Tony. All right, now moving on to correspondence. The first item of correspondence tonight is outgoing from the city to the Honorable Ravi Cologne, Minister of Housing, regarding low-income senior housing in Cranbrook. Any discussion on that item? Okay. And moving on to item 12.2. The next item of correspondence tonight is outgoing from the city to the Board of Education Trustees for School District Number 5 regarding childcare spaces. Any discussion on that item? Councilor Blissett.
Thank you. Some members of the public read the article in the paper, and they're very concerned about the city possibly selling land for childcare, because from their perspective, the school board has a lot of land and we do not. They also suggested that we get a hold of the Kootenai Childcare Resources, and that we should be contacting them directly with regard to the childcare initiative. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Okay, CEO Furcho.
Just an update to council this week, the expression of interest so that all of those childcare agencies could respond, just giving us a 1 or 2 pager on what we could do with their suggestion proposals will be going out. So you'll see that going out publicly too.
Okay, Councilor Stetsky.
I took the opportunity last week at UBCM to meet with the Honorable Grace Lohr, who's the Minister of State for Childcare, and talk a little bit about childcare in Cranbrook. She said she'd be happy to come and pay us and the school board a visit if we'd like to extend an invitation to her. So I suggest that perhaps we might want to do that.
Okay, duly noted. Okay, moving on to item 12.3. The next item of correspondence tonight is from Linda Berkeroff, dated September 12th, 2023, regarding urban deer population reaches unmanageable and unmanageable numbers. Any discussion? Receive for information? Okay, receive for information. Item 12.4. Next item of correspondence tonight is from Leanne Strawn. Okay, thank you, Councilor Lissette. St. John Ambulance received September 13th, 2023, regarding a donation request. Discussion, or is there receive for information? Okay, we'll receive that for information. The next item of correspondence tonight is from Jason Jacob, President of the East Kootenay Chamber of Mines, received September 18th, 2023, regarding a sponsorship request for the Minerals South Conference 2023. Council had previously supported 2 coffee breaks in the amount of $250 each from the council contingency. Is there a motion to do that again this year, or do we want to receive for information? Councilor Blissett?
I would move that we could support the 2 coffee breaks as we have done in the past.
Okay. Seconded by Councilor Graham. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. The next item of correspondence tonight is from Jim Hong, Light Up Coordinator for the Cranbrook Lions Club, received September 19th, 2023, regarding a request for transit for annual Christmas light up on December 10th. There's a potential motion that council receive the correspondence from the Cranbrook Lions Club and further approve the request to provide transit service to conduct the annual light up tour in Cranbrook on December 10th, 2023. So I'd like to make that motion. Councilor Blissett, seconded by Councilor Graham. Discussion? Councilor Popoff?
Yes, thank you. And mentioned here, we've done it forever. So why are we making Jim Hong come back to us every year for a request? Why can't we just build it in until we know that the Lions Club is still not in the business?
I think it might be a way of just announcing that they're doing it again. I guess too, we should make sure that we have the staffing resources to make this happen as well. Okay, saying that, I'll take a vote. All in favor? Carried. And this brings us now to mayor and councilors' reports and inquiries. I'm going to start with Mayor Price, just so I don't forget him.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have nothing to report on this end at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Price. Councilor Graham.
Yeah, thank you. A busy week. Had quite a busy week last week at UBCM, attending lots of sessions and sitting in on resolutions. And it definitely brings back an old saying that I've heard multiple times throughout the years at UBCM is that we got to remember to stick to our knitting. And sometimes with those resolutions going forward or discussions, it feels like they want to be the provincial government. And we still have to remember that we are local government, and we need to advocate on behalf of what's important to us. And so it was definitely a good time out there. And I also was elected second vice president of UBCM. So looking forward to representing Cranbrook and BC municipalities.
All right. Councilor Popoff.
Yes, thank you. And what Councilor Graham didn't mention was if he's not challenged in 2 years from now, he will be the president of UBCM. So we hope all that goes well. Many highlights, many events, too many to mention here from UBCM, but one of the unique things in my time, 9th year on council, is Councillor Stetsky and I, and you might want to speak of it as well, had an audience with the BC Human Rights Commissioner, and they were interested in how we are practicing our human rights requirements for our homeless people, our tent encampments and everything else. So we had I think a great fluid back and forth conversation, and they were really interested to hear that we are asking for if they can support us, among other things, with getting greater attention from BC Housing so they can help meet some of the challenges that we're currently facing here in Cranbrook. And lastly, a big thank you to Councillor Blissett. She labored through 7 hours of resolutions. So when we came up on the docket twice, she got to the microphone and the big screens and pushed through our 2 resolutions. So thank you, Councillor Blissett, that I didn't have to do it.
Okay, Councillor Ray.
Thank you. So last week I had the pleasure of attending the webinar for the situation table. I was certainly very impressed. It's a very structured approach, lots of expertise that's coming in to that new initiative here in Cranbrook. And, you know, it's another new initiative. So in addition to funding the 4th watch clerk for the RCMP, our social development coordinator, our new camping bylaw, the situation table is now another new resource. And all of these take some time to get some traction. So we do appreciate the patience and support from the community, but I'm very pleased to see this council implementing new strategies. And we do need some time though for them to get some traction. And then in addition, we had the very exciting announcement about the expansion of the Green Home. You know, very much needed additional spaces for seniors who need care. And in addition, childcare spaces are included in that development. So that was a fantastic announcement to see for the city of Cranbrook. And I look forward to work on that starting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ray. Councillor Stetsky.
Yeah, thank you. It certainly was a busy week at UBCM. I met with a number of ministers, including, as I mentioned, the Honorable Grace Lohr for childcare. Also met with the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, Sheila Malcolmson, and Sheila would like to come to Cranbrook probably after Christmas. Schedule's pretty full until then. But again, she suggested if we send them a letter, so Mayor Price, perhaps when you're back, we can invite these 2 ministers to come to Cranbrook at some point in the future. And they did say they do appreciate specific invitational letters coming from municipalities. As Councillor Popoff said, we did meet with the Human Rights Commissioner, Kasari Govander, and 3 of her staff. Very interesting. I brought some information back, which I've shared with council. It'll be in your email, in your in basket. Basically, it's so challenging. You know, the UBCM conference title was basically about balance, and that really is the challenge. You know, our message to the commissioner was that we care about all of our citizens living in our communities, and we have to find the right balance in the end to try and keep as many people healthy and happy as possible. And it's very challenging. She is potentially going to do up a report. And again, as Councillor Popoff said, she did say that she's not afraid to point fingers at BC Housing in terms of their need to get further involved in what's happening in all of our communities across British Columbia. So that could be very positive indeed. But busy week and lots of good meetings, and we'll talk about it more at future council meetings, I'm sure.
Councillor Blissett.
Well, thank you, Your Acting Worship. As mentioned, I was at UBCM and lots of learning. The sessions, the clinics they ran were very good. Certainly attended one on forest fires and the impacts of climate change, which was very difficult to sit through, just because of what they were talking about. Is we talk about climate adaptation, but that's if there's a reasonable amount of climate change. If we just keep on business as usual, we will not be able to adapt to this. And so it was very difficult to hear. And that's the latest research on this. So it's not something we can ignore and just keep on keeping on. So, but anyways, I did, as Councillor Popoff mentioned, I volunteered to look after the resolutions. I'll rethink that in the future. But no, it was good. They did approve 2 of our resolutions automatically. in the bank of resolutions that they approved. Then there were other ones that had to come to the floor. And that's what took the hours and hours to pass because of the volume of resolutions. Now they have said they're going to revamp the resolution process. So that'll be on Councillor Graham's shoulders, and I'm looking forward to that. It is interesting though to be there. I mean, I was there primarily for our resolutions, but it's important to be able to vote on some of the other ones because yes, some of them needed. I mean, one vote came down to 50.4 to 49.6%. It was crazy. So one vote difference. And anyways, it was important to be there. Those resolutions, I'm assuming, then get sent on to the provincial government and sorted out for each ministry, and it goes from there. So they may have some impact. But anyways, interesting time and definitely worthwhile to be there. And I did a little bit of shopping on the side. And I was also thinking that, maybe the 7 hours of resolutions was because I need to work on patience. And so I had a real good session of that.
Thank you, Councilor Bissett. I have two things tonight. First, from October 1st to 7th, 2023 is Kids Sports BC, powered by Sport BC Week. Kids Sports' mission is to remove the financial barriers that prevent some children from playing organized sports. Hashtag so all kids can play. Citizens are encouraged to support the local kids sport chapter to help more kids experience everything sport has to offer. And then secondly, I want to extend my warmest congratulations to Councillor Graham for his remarkable achievement in being elected as the second vice president for UBCM. This is a testament of his dedication, leadership, and tireless efforts to not only serve our city, but the communities across our province. And we wish you every success in your new role. Thank you. And with that, we are at the end of the open portion of the meeting. We'll take a brief recess before we go back into our closed meeting. I don't know.